Welcome everybody to the ITESOFT webinar that we are running today about how do you improve supplier relationships, and specifically how do you do that via digitalisation. So we've started the webinar on time. I do know that just from an information perspective, we've got some people who are in the process of still logging on. I think one or two of them have got a few technical problems, and therefore we're just going to wait a little while, maybe a minute or so, just to allow them to get on properly before we carry on with the webinar in total. Okay, we're going to start. I think we've got almost, if not everybody, on board now. So thank you very much for your patience. A little bit of housekeeping for you. We are going to be doing some poll questions during this webinar. So I do actually need your participation during this, so please stay awake. And the other aspect to this is that we are going to allow questions to be put in through the chat log. So on the right hand side of your screen there should be a little box which has chat on it. If you put questions in that as we go through this, then we'll pick these up and we'll deal with these at the end. So everybody who is on the webinar is on mute, and therefore it will only be my voice that you'll hear. As you can see on the screen, I also have Craig Lindley with me, who is our technical pre-sales manager for the product set, and he will be taking you through the product later on when we actually show you what and how the product does what it does. So just be aware, have the chat log open so you can put any questions in as we go through. So what we're looking to cover today in terms of the agenda is that there are a few different bits that we're going to go through before I hand over to Craig. So what are the drivers and the needs around Supplier Portal, as well as an element of digitalisation to this. But fundamentally, you can't do Supplier Portal capability and supplier relationship capability without having a level of digitalisation in place. So that then takes us into what are the benefits of having a digital platform, and there'll be a variety of different things that I'll be looking to talk through with that. I'll be handing over to Craig, who will take you through the software at that stage in a little bit more detail. And then I've put questions and answers at the end, but I'll need your questions before we get to that stage to be able to provide some answers for you. And then we'll finish off and wrap up at that stage. So without further ado, we will move on into the first section, which is looking at a larger scale than maybe some of you will be used to looking at, about the digitalisation and where that specifically looks like into the finance area. So what we've got here on the left-hand side of the screen is companies that are considering what their progress is and some results that have come back about, is that good, is it bad, etc. Now this is coming from Capgemini in this case. So we will, these are the results that they've had coming back from that. And with this, they went out over a 2-year period to approximately 80%, it was just over 80% of their the leading market companies in the markets that they work with that are working in the digital platform area. And this is the feedback they got on the report that they put together on how companies are progressing. This was taken from both an operational perspective as well as from a strategy perspective. And as we can see here, 64% of the organizations believe that they are not going fast enough on the digitalisation aspect of this within their finance companies. And if we then look at what's happening on the right-hand side of the screen, where companies are looking to have a digital platform in place by 2020, well, 80% of the respondents are coming back. Now, this one's by Gartner in this case, are saying that they will be doing this or will be there at that stage. So there's actually going to still be lots of companies that will not have a complete digital platform in place. And this is a topic that will be discussed in a later webinar rather than necessarily today about what is a digital platform and the various different components that make that up. But it's interesting to see that everyone, or the vast majority of organizations out there, are looking to go down the digital route, but most companies aren't doing it quickly enough or in the right sort of areas that their operational staff are looking for them to go in. So we're now going to take that, and I now need some input from yourselves about where are you guys? Do you have a digitalization plan in the future or for the future in place? Do you have one already? Is that part of the reason why you're here looking at this type of capability and how you can work better with your suppliers? Or do you not have one at all? Or has that not been communicated to you in a clear and concise manner that would allow you to be able to give you a feel for which way to go? So if you can put your answers in there, that would be great. We'll just wait another 10 seconds for as many people as possible to be able to respond. And in 3, 2, 1, we'll close the poll questions. So thank you very much for everyone who has contributed to that. It was not quite everyone, but most people, or the vast majority of people. What's interesting about that is, surprise, surprise, most people have gone, yes, we do have a plan. There are no one who's gone no, but there are a few people who have said they don't know, which I suspect more is about internal communication rather than anything else. Well, let's move a little bit further into the digital platform side of things. And if we look at the first stat that we've got up there, and this is more focused at decision makers, and 85% of them, so this is organizations that are already on a digital path, feel that what they're doing will have a major impact in 12 months on operational capability. So it's sort of out of line with the previous slide we did before the poll question, where companies feel that they'll have a digital platform in place by 2020, and also that companies are not moving quickly enough to be able to do things. So there seems to be an expectation level which is not being met against the reality of what's being delivered, which is quite interesting. But what also is interesting about that's coming out of this is most of them feel that their processes are going to be affected first by this new capability that's being put in place, especially around automated workflows within the business. So that in its own right should speed up what's happening within your organization. And therefore it means that there could be better communication put in place. But what's also interesting is if we go to the next one, which is 50% consider that it's essential to digitalize processes end to end. So what that says to me, reading between the lines, is that for a lot of organizations, they are not putting digital platforms in place which look at the whole end-to-end solution. So, and this has been put down here about what that end-to-end capability is. So we're talking about the finance area, invoice processing. So anything from a document or an invoice coming into your organization, right through to that document having data extracted off it, validated, discrepancy matching done on it, sending out for approvals and so on, that case management capability, ready for payment, being paid, and then archiving that document off. That's the full end-to-end capability, and I appreciate there's integration and other aspects to it. But if only 50% of them consider that that's what they're putting in place, there's a huge number of organizations that are not putting a digital platform in. And I suspect even for most organizations, when you really drill into, let's just take the first one, document scanning. Well, why even having to do document scanning in the first place when most invoices come in by email? So really interesting perception ideas that are coming out of some of this capability. And then the last one, which I think is a bit of a hidden little gem here for us, is 40% of decision makers want to authenticate incoming documents for governance, security, etc., and traceability. Are we actually talking about blockchain here? Something that has been, highly visible in the media, but actually for most organizations, they haven't really understood what it means or how it can be applied. So if you're looking to be able to authenticate documents and know where it comes from and have that verified, digitalization and platforms are the only way of being able to achieve that type of capability. So what we're going to do now is look at some of the reasons for putting invoice automation in place. Strangely enough, the first one tends to be reducing processing costs. And what do they mean by that? Well, the capability that organizations are looking to put in place is, in some cases, in reducing processing costs, is about reducing headcount. Doesn't always mean that, but yes, that is sometimes the case. In most cases, what they are trying to do is to increase what's going on in the team, build capacity into the team, never mind just building capability into the team. Now, that capability could be knowledge about how to deal with certain suppliers or certain business units within the organizations. One of the key fundamental areas, and I was at an organization yesterday where this was exactly the problem that they just wanted to be able to deal with, is how do we pay our suppliers on time? And, we had, a senior finance person in the room who said, how difficult can it be to, get an invoice come into the organization and pay them on time? And yet that was exactly the problem that they've got. Never mind this then impacts into, assuming you're big enough, into things like DTR, etc. So when we then come to aspects like DTR, it then comes into, well, what is the governance and the compliance that you need to put in place? Never mind from an internal perspective, but also external. How about reducing your audit costs? How about making that simpler, faster, cheaper, and easier? Now, your auditors will probably just look elsewhere and carry on spending the same amount of time, but they won't be eating up your AP time. One of the key things that we generally find for most organizations that they really want to be able to deal with, and this relates back to paying a supplier on time, is where's my invoice? Or where are the invoices that I'm being chased by my supplier from? How do I know where it is? Who's dealing with it? When are they dealing with it? We'll come back to this one in more detail. And then finally, how do we increase the reputation of the finance team by making sure that any information which is produced to the business or sent to Treasury, etc., is correct? So taking errors out. How do we ensure that that we are paying the suppliers correctly one time? We don't have duplicates. We don't have frauds potentially going on within the organisation. So there are a number of various different drivers that are going on across the business. Some are obviously hard benefits. There's a huge amount of governance benefits that need to be put in place from a strategic perspective within the organisation. So what we're going to look at now are the different components, the different capabilities that you need to be able to have to make up that full end-to-end solution that we were talking about previously. So the first one being that on the left-hand side of your screen, you've got capture. What that means is capturing by a scanner for paper invoices, capturing by email. Well, you can capture by email, but what do you then do with it? We find a lot of organizations, you're printing off, you're putting in a shared service drive, a shared internal drive. How do you import things in? It could be you're getting that from an Excel spreadsheet. You've got E-invoicing, which covers a number of different things here, pictures, etc., etc. So how do you capture an invoice in all the different formats that you may well have on just being able to get that image that you want, and therefore start the process of a digital platform? The next key thing that comes out of that, in reality though, is that's just the start of the process. You need to be able to extract data off and out of that image. You need to be able to validate that and then do something with that. And fundamentally, what you're looking to be able to do, the happy path is at the top of your screen where it says no touch, and be able to go straight from capture, extraction, validation to no touch, and we end up in the ERP ready to pay. Yeah, great, job done. That is exactly what you're looking to do to maximize straight-through productivity, minimize the level of work and involvement that AP need to have. Fantastic. But you're going to have your non-PO invoices. They're going to have to go to AP because you're going to need to do something with them. They're going to have to either send them out into the business and the business code them up, or normally what we find, AP don't trust the business because they do get coding wrong, therefore they'll do the coding and then send them out into the business for approval resolution, and then at that stage have them exported out into the business. To deal with things like the visibility and the governance, well, that's why we have the analytics and dashboard across the top, which provides the information about when did an invoice come in, what's happened with about, or what's happened to it, where is it, and is that meeting your internal SLAs? And then down the bottom, the final one, and this is where it really comes in for true e-invoicing, where a supplier can send in an invoice and then track an invoice through the organization. Supplier Portal. So Supplier Portal, you can put invoices up through that into the capture piece, but then it allows so much more. And this is where we're then going to be focusing for the rest of the webinar, is how do you use a Supplier Portal to be able to increase and improve relationships with your suppliers, because your suppliers are highly important for you. With you're buying goods from them for a particular reason. Maybe you're assembling them into other items. Well, if that supplier goes out of business, you've got real problems. So you want to have a good relationship with them, and vice versa. So why are we looking at Supplier Portal in a lot more detail? So the first part of this that we're going to look at is how does this relate to yourselves from an internal perspective? Well, the first one is just to be able to work more simply, easier, faster with the supplier on their invoices. Now, that may be on a very basic level about, I've had a phone call and where is it? We'll come back to that one. But in this case, it could be specifically to deal with any disputes on an invoice. Probably likely to do with either a goods receipt, i.e. you've ordered a certain amount and they haven't all been fully delivered, or there's a query on an invoice to do with a price, something like that. Or it could be a non-PO invoice that, well, we didn't order these goods, or it's completely different. So this is a way of just making it so much simpler, smoother, and easier than it currently is at the moment. Well, what about the master data? What information you hold about the supplier? What happens when that data changes? Which it does reasonably regularly. What happens if it could be change of bank details, it could be change of address, it could be you want more information from your supplier that they haven't provided yet, VAT number, etc., etc. So how does your supplier provide that information to you so that you can have the highest levels? Because this helps to identify invoices faster and to be able to process it through your organization. What about, fundamentally reducing the time that you take internally at the moment to deal with queries that come in from your suppliers? Now that query could be, as I said earlier, as simple as have you got my invoice, to something a bit more sophisticated around when is my invoice going to be paid, what payment run is it on, to things like supplier statements. Generally we find that for most organizations have got thousands of suppliers, active suppliers, and in excess of 50% of them, so the majority of them, are sending in supplier statements, which generally tend to be multi-page documents. How do you deal with that? That's your time in your organization. Where's your benefit for this? The other aspect to a supplier portal from your point of view is how do you actually take out the system duplicate invoices? How do you help to deal with fraudulent invoices in a much more effective and transparent way? We'll talk about this side of things as well, but this is where you're starting to be able to have money coming back into the organization, because for most organizations, if they've paid a duplicate invoice, the likelihood of getting that money back is low. We've got the stats on that. If you need it, put the questions in and ask. And of course, one of the key things about this is being able to pay your suppliers on time. How do we speed up the process? How are we more efficient? How are we more productive so that we can pay on time with invoices that are solid, that we're happy to pay for? Any questions on this, put them in through the chat log and we'll come to answer these at the end. What we're now going to have a look at is where's the value in this for your suppliers? What are your suppliers trying to achieve? And one of the first things that, at a very basic level, that they're looking for is, have you got my invoice? And that's usually what a lot of phone calls tend to be about. I've sent an invoice in, have you received it? And depending on how your organization is structured, they're probably calling into the finance team, but it might be that it's out in one of the business locations because that's where they sent it, because that's who ordered the goods. It may well be that from their point of view, it's about having more visibility of what's happening internally within your organization, so that you don't have to go off and chase around the organization. They can be able to find that information much easier. What about payments? They'll have an accounts receivable team who will be phoning their suppliers, their organizations that they have produced goods for, to say, when are you paying? Or it might even be that they have phoned in to say, you've made one payment which covers a number of invoices, and they're looking to do a payment reconciliation with you. Things like that. We come across this sort of stuff regularly. What about how quickly a dispute's going to be resolved on an invoice? At the moment, they don't know. They might have called in, yes, we've got the invoice, and it's out in the business because there was an issue with it. When's that going to be resolved? Do they know? All these sort of stuff, all these sort of things, create additional work because there's always follow-up things that need to be done. How do you get information back from your supplier, or how can your supplier provide that information back about, they've got the information you need to be able to resolve it? It just, lots more questions start to come out of this. And this is about how do you put something in place that means that it's simpler, easier to be able to have that communication through an audited manner that suppliers and yourselves can work from. So, what we're now going to do is have a look at some of the benefits of that side of things. But before I delve into that in a bit more detail, we're going to have another question, so everyone needs to wake up again, please. Thank you. And the question is, does your organization currently have in place the ability for your suppliers to a portal for them to essentially do true e-invoicing? They can supply an invoice to you electronically, and more importantly, they can track that through your organization. So we made the answers for this very simple again. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Or you don't know yet, hence why you are looking to do some research at this moment in time. So we'll just give you a minute for that, and then to allow people to answer, and then we'll carry on. That's great. I can see most people have answered. So 3, 2, 1, we're going to close it. Thank you very much for your answers. And interestingly enough, most people have come back and said no. There are a few that have said yes, and there are a few that have gone don't know. I suspect that's why you're here. And surprise, surprise, that's pretty much in line with what I would personally expect in terms of feedback in the organisations that I'm speaking with, because most companies don't have it. They might have a procurement portal, but it's not the same as a supplier portal, which can be discussed later. So let's get into some of the benefits of a supplier portal and just help to wrap this up before I hand over to Craig. So the first one is visibility. So it's not just visibility of an invoice, but this is visibility internally for your organization, not just from an AP point of view, but also from the business, because you now got, if you've got visibility, we're now tracking it electronically, which means you can get reports from that to be able to say, where is it, how long has it been there, is this meeting SLAs, etc., etc. But it's also visibility for your suppliers. The whole point is your suppliers will be communicating with you because they want to know when their money is coming in. And they will have a number of different methods and ways of being able to do this. If you can provide that information to them in a proactive way, but without costing you any AP time, money and effort, that you can use better elsewhere, this helps. You can, and we can go into other reasons around that as well. But fundamentally, you're not going to stop late payments because there may be some very, very valid reasons why you're not going to pay, to do with price dispute or a quantity dispute that they just can't deliver to you on time, but they sent you the invoice. So, but if you've got a good reason why that's a late payment in comparison to payment terms and what they've sent you, not a problem. The other aspect to this is how are you able to work better together about being able to resolve issues on invoices. So this is specifically about things to do with your, usually it's PO-based invoices more than anything else, and having that audit trail in place, which just shows a nice, clean way of how you've worked. Now, the other aspect that comes out of this by having a supplier portal in place is you are now putting yourself in a position where you can discuss, are your payment deadlines correct or not? Do you have the capability from this of being able to pick out, for instance, early payment discounts if you wanted to negotiate that with your suppliers? Because you now have a better communication and a better relationship with them because they know when you're going to be paying and how you're going to be paying much better because they're providing that information from their accounts receivable team who can log into it and find all this so much simpler and faster and easier. And they can take that information and go to their boss and say, I've done my job. Fantastic. The next thing that happens is all this information can be updated. Your suppliers can update their information about what you're holding about them when it changes, and it allows vouchers and a whole host of other aspects that are coming through. Now, I appreciate we're moving on in time, but what I would like to be able to do before I hand over to Craig is take you through a couple of scenarios just to get your head thinking about this. So, think about your own situation. How many invoices do you currently have per year that you're processing? In this scenario, I'm going to say it's 50,000. Okay? We're talking specifically about supplier queries here. And what we're going to say is that we have 5% of invoices, the 50,000 invoices that we have per year that are getting calls. Okay? We're going to say an average time to be able to resolve that call, finish to end, or start to finish, that'll be the one, thank you, is about 10 minutes. And an internal rate we're going to say is £20 per hour. Okay. Now, you can take these figures and work it out yourself, but you know what I would like you to do is to apply your invoice volume to this, and then still go 5% of invoices, 10 minutes, £20 per hour. And what we're looking to do is extrapolate out of that things like how many hours is that we're talking about. So, you know, based on hours per year, we're talking about 417 hours for 5% of invoices, with 10 minutes per call. Yeah. Now, this is 5% of invoices. I don't know any company that gets, you know, 5% of invoices with a phone call. Usually, with conversations that I'm having with organisations, it's far higher. But let's work on this basis at the moment. So, what do you think that works out as? Number of hours multiplied by the hourly rate, which is almost £8,500 per year, just on 5% of your invoices to deal with one phone call for each of them at 10 minutes each. So, relatively simple, but this all adds up into the business case. I need you guys to look at this and go, how can we extrapolate that information into what your figures are? Let's look at another example. Okay, so let's go into this one in a bit more detail. This one is looking, so the previous one we looked at only 5% of invoices. One of the things that really gets me, and I will get on a soapbox at this stage about various things, is supplier statements. So let's take an organisation that's got, in this case, 2,000 active suppliers. We know organisations that have got many, many more than that. Some, you know, probably the biggest one I've come across is 60-odd thousand active suppliers. We're going to take from this that 25% of them are sending in statements on a monthly basis. So 25% of the 2,000 active suppliers, that's 500 suppliers, are sending in a supplier statement every month. And the time to deal with that, and that could be in whatever format that your supplier wants to send that in. And we're saying that it takes 1 hour on average to be able to consolidate that and verify that. Okay, we're still saying average time for internal staff is £20 per hour. Okay, now we're going to start, you know, adding these figures up and doing the calculation on that. Okay, so 500 suppliers coming in every month by 12, so that's 60,000. £20 per hour. What number do you think this is going to come out at per year? This is an internal cost for yourselves. Yes, that is correct. £120,000 per annum that costs you on supplier statements alone. So just with these two examples, and I started off deliberately small with the 5% of the base and queries to supplier statements. What about payment reconciliation? We've got other things we could be talking about here that go into the business case. So on that basis, what I would like you to do, any questions, please put them in through the chat log and we'll pick them up afterwards. And at this point, I'm going to hand across to Craig, who is going to take you through Supplier Portal in much more detail. Craig, over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Alan. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. So I've pointed my browser at ITESOFT Supplier Portal, and I'm now going to log in as a vendor. So I'm logging as a supplier for commercial electrical heat in this instance. So if I key my username and password, we'll also know if they forget their password, they can, you know, get a reset link. So it is completely self-serving from their side. So if we just log into the Supplier Portal. Click login. There we go. Okay, so when we first log in, the supplier is taken to a home page. By default for suppliers, this is blank. However, this is something that can be customized by yourselves. So if you would like to get a message to certain suppliers or to all suppliers, this is where you can put information to them. So for example, if you're having a big push towards email rather than paper-based invoices, you can put those notes up here. to remind the suppliers when they log in. Okay, if we click over to the left here, you'll see that the supplier has a number of options available to them. First one is invoice list. So this is quite possibly the most interesting. So from here, they can see the status of all of their invoices that they've ever submitted to you. So over at the left, they can do things like they can filter by invoice or credit note. They can search for certain status of invoice, so whether it's one that's pending payment, whether it's one that's in dispute, etc. Just change that to all. They can also see the company that's been invoiced. So essentially most organizations have lots of different legal entities, and we can filter on this as well, so that's quite nice. So we also have the date, so they can, they can filter invoices for a particular date period. For example, if they've sent you 10 invoices this month, they can change from the first of the month to the end of the month and just see if you have received all 10 of those. So that's quite nice as well. They can also see when these payments are due to be paid. So for example, this one is due to be paid on the 28th of the month. That's when the next payment is going to happen, and when it's going to hit their account. We can also see as well if any discount is going to be taken on that invoice. So if the supplier offers an early settlement discount, you can see what's going to be taken. They can also search by invoice number, which is quite obvious. They also can search by gross amount, so they can search for invoices over a certain amount, for example. And they can see the source, which is useful, as well as the country. So the source is how this invoice has come into your organization. So these ones were sent externally via email, and these ones here were sent via the supplier portal itself. So they have the ability to send invoices through this actual portal. Over on the right here, they have the ability to view the invoice image. So if, for example, they forget what they've actually invoiced you for, they can view their invoice as well. That's a nice feature. So they can also, one of the nice things is they can have a conversation with your accounts payable department from here. So for example, let's just pick this invoice over here. We can say, we expected £200, not 150. And accounts payable will get notification of this. They'll get an email. They can reply directly back to this, so they can have an interaction with the supplier. And this is quite nice. It means that the supplier can, potentially out of hours, they can use this platform. They can send messages. They can come in the next day and see replies that have been made by your staff. So that is really, really useful. Okay, other options that they have as well is they can also flip it on its head. So they're no longer looking at invoices. They're looking at payments that you've made to them. So this is particularly useful for, when most organizations would just send you statements and things like that. They can actually see here, rather than phoning you up and saying, you paid us £3,840, why did you pay us £5,000? They can see here that that payment is made up of these 3 invoices. And again, they can comment on them from here. They can view the invoice image as well. So they can get a feel for it. It could be because it's less than they expected because there's a credit in there for £2,000, for example. But what this does is this really cuts down on the conversations that they have to have on the phone with your accounts payable department, chasing invoices that you've never ever received. So it means that they can be completely self-sufficient. Over on the supplier pages tab, they can also view their supplier information. So they can view what information you hold about them. So they can see the VAT registration details that you have, the address, the bank details that you're going to pay. You can also see if they're using a factoring company, things like that. And they have the ability to effectively let you know if that information is not correct. Obviously, they still need to go through all the kind of due diligence just to make sure that they really are who they say they are, things like that. But they almost get a level of pre-authorization because they've logged into Supplier Portal, so you're pretty sure that the message is good. Okay, they also, as we mentioned earlier, they have the ability to upload invoices here as well. So if in that example earlier they noticed that there should have been 4 invoices paid, but there's only 3, they can at this point say that I would like to send an invoice to ITESOFT UK, and this is my missing invoice. We also have the ability here to specify, to require that the supplier gives you some information on this. It's not mandatory, but we can make certain fields mandatory as required. So here, for example, we can attach our invoice images, and if we wanted, we could attach another one. Let's say this is a credit note, and they can upload these invoices right through this platform here. The first person from any organization that signs up for the Supplier Portal becomes an admin user for their company. So what this means is they can add extra users from their own organization to give them some visibility of the Supplier Portal. So it could be that they want them to be able to view payments, but not necessarily supplier information, or they want to, not allow them to upload invoices, but to be able to search invoices. So there's things that the supplier can do there. So this tool itself is very, very user friendly. There's no real training required, although documentation is available to provide to your suppliers. But it really does offer massive, massive benefits for both supplier and yourselves. I think Alan mentioned earlier, but with the figures that we tend to have, roughly 30% of accounts payable's time is effectively wasted answering queries that with this tool, suppliers could answer themselves. Okay, so that's Supplier Portal in a nutshell. So at this moment, I'm just going to pass back to Alan.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Craig. A couple of things at this moment in time that I would suggest is if you've got any questions about this, or another element to it would be if you want to see the product in more detail, again, go back through the chat log and just let the team know when you put it in through the chat log that you would like to have either a demonstration set up, or you'd like someone to come and have a conversation with you, etc. Any other questions about what Craig has actually showed you in the demonstration there? I appreciate it wasn't a particularly long one, and he didn't get into a huge amount of depth in certain areas due to time, but please put the questions in through the chat log. So, in terms of the webinar content, that is us essentially finished with that at the moment. And what we're now going to do is move into any questions that you may have, again, that we'll pick up through the chat log and look to answer these as we can. Although I am aware that we are very tight on time in terms of being able to finish as we should be. If we don't get to, and I can see we've got some questions coming in through as we speak, so if we don't get to all the questions, the team will get back to you individually with the question that you have, and again, you can have a dialogue with them about anything else that you may well want to do at the moment. But while that is going on, one of the questions that we've had coming in is that one of the companies out there has less than 50,000 invoices a year, and at what point, well, the question is there a bottom line for this, that the technology doesn't work? The simple answer is no. This will work with any volume of invoices, but obviously where the value for this is in the higher elements. I would, we've used as part of this webinar session 50,000 invoices as an example. We actually have some customers that have got hundreds of thousands of invoices a year that they're dealing with, but conversely, we've got others that are 20, 25,000, because it depends on your organization rather than anything else. It also depends on what you're trying to achieve. So is there a bottom line to it? Yes, to a certain extent there is, because there always has to be a cost-benefit scenario for that. But it's not that you can just buy Supplier Portal by itself. We have the capture piece at the front that you need to have, because Supplier Portal won't work without that. So hopefully, that makes sense. But the reason for using 50,000 invoices a year was just to be able to pull out some of the examples around the business case, what the value is, and what organizations and suppliers can achieve from that. We've got, right, we're running out of time. Another question come in, which is, how long have we been offering Supplier Portal? We've as a company had Supplier Portal for 2-3 years, something like that. It's not particularly long in terms of the overall timescales, but it's only really been in the last 12 months that it's actually started to really get people's attention, and organisations are really serious about looking about how they can move that forward. Time has gone. Please put any more questions in that you've got, and we will come back to you more than anything else. Next webinar is up there for you, so please look to deal with that. If you are interested more about the RPA side of things and artificial intelligence. At this moment in time, I would just like to thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon or early evening, and I will leave it there. Thank you.